They released a bioweapon on themselves? Not exactly, sir. Lieutenant Kowalski adjusted her glasses, a nervous habit she'd never quite shaken despite the neural implants that had made corrective lenses obsolete decades ago. They released it on us, but humans appear to be completely immune. Immune? Davis snorted. Nobody's immune to the Gizrak viral arsenal. Those bastards have been perfecting it for centuries. Well, we are. Kowalski swiped through several charts. And not just immune, we're absorbing it. The silence in the command center was thick enough to cut with a plasma knife. Define absorbing, Lieutenant. That's the thing, sir. I can't. Not precisely. Our scientists are still trying to figure it out. But it appears that human DNA is incorporating the viral code, without mutation, without side effects. Davis leaned back in his chair, the ancient piece of furniture, real wood, a family heirloom, creaking in protest. And the Gizrak? Decimated, sir. Their own bioweapon turned against them. Ironic, really. Irony's a bitch, Davis muttered, rubbing his temple. And the other species in the coalition? Varying degrees of effect. The Tellurians are experiencing about 60% mortality. The Vex have developed a resistance but are still suffering significant neural degradation. The Meridians? She paused. Well, they're actually experiencing some beneficial mutations. Lucky bastards. Davis stood up, pacing the length of the command center. So let me get this straight. The Gizrak, in their infinite wisdom, decided to release a bioweapon designed to wipe out the coalition forces, and instead, they've mostly hurt themselves, given the Meridian superpowers, and done absolutely nothing to humanity except possibly make us... what? Better? Potentially, sir. We're still studying the effects. Jesus H. Christ on a pogo stick. Davis shook his head. Get me a secure channel to Earth Central. They're gonna love this. Here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy just can't seem to wrap their various sensory appendages around. We're basically walking garbage disposals with opposable thumbs and an unhealthy fascination with explosions. No, seriously. Think about it. We evolved on a planet where pretty much everything was trying to kill us. Predators with teeth and claws? Check. Plants loaded with toxins? Double check. Microscopic organisms that turn our insides into their personal party pads? Triple check with a cherry on top. And that's just the biological stuff. Don't even get me started on the geological death traps. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis. Earth basically spent millions of years trying to shake us off like a dog with fleas. But here's the kicker. Instead of dying like any sensible species would, we just adapted. We figured out which plants would kill us and which ones would just make us hallucinate entertainingly. We studied the microbes that made us sick and turned them into medicines. We even learned to predict when the planet was about to throw one of its temper tantrums. By the time we stumbled out into the galaxy, we were basically the interstellar equivalent of that one friend who can eat anything. You know, the one who looks at expired milk, shrugs, and chugs it anyways. So when the Gizrak decided to unleash their supposedly perfect bioweapon on the coalition forces, they really should have done their homework on human biology first. So what you're telling me, General Hammond's holographic projection flickered slightly as he leaned forward, is that this virus is actually giving our troops upgrades? Dr. Eliza Vaughn nodded, her excitement barely contained. It's more complex than that, but essentially, yes. The viral DNA contains sequences that enhance certain cognitive functions, muscle efficiency, even sensory perception, but only in humans. And we have no idea why? Well, Dr. Vaughn tilted her head. We have theories. The most compelling one has to do with human junk DNA. Junk DNA? Hammond raised an eyebrow. It's a bit of a misnomer, actually. For decades, scientists thought that large portions of our genome were useless, evolutionary leftovers. But we now know that much of this so-called junk actually regulates gene expression. Get to the point, Doctor. Right, sorry. She cleared her throat. Humans have an unusually high percentage of viral remnants in our DNA. About 8% of our genome consists of ancient viral code that our ancestors were infected with and subsequently incorporated. It's one of the ways we evolved so rapidly. So what you're saying is, the Gizrak virus isn't affecting us negatively because our DNA already contains similar viral sequences. Our bodies recognize parts of it as self, but instead of just neutralizing it, we're upgrading, using the new code as a template for enhancements. Hammond fell silent, processing this information. And the Gizrak themselves? Devastated. Their genetic structure is too rigid, too perfect. They engineered their own genome to be resistant to mutations centuries ago. It was supposed to make them invulnerable to disease, but it also made them unable to adapt. Precisely. When their virus mutated, which ironically was probably due to exposure to human DNA, they had no defense against it. They've essentially been hoisted by their own petard. They're what now? Dr. Vaughn blushed slightly. Sorry. Old expression. It means, I know what it means, Doctor. Hammond's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. I just didn't expect to hear Shakespeare from a xenobiologist. We're a cultured bunch, sir. Evidently. Hammond straightened. Keep me updated on any developments, especially regarding these enhancements. I want to know exactly what our troops are capable of now. Yes, sir. As the hologram flickered out, Dr. Vaughn turned back to her lab, where dozens of samples from enhanced human soldiers awaited analysis. On the central display, a simulation showed the Gizrak virus interacting with human DNA, the viral strands being disassembled and reassembled in real time. Cultured bunch indeed, she murmured to herself. Let's see what other tricks you've got up your microscopic sleeve. The thing about being a soldier in the 22nd century is that you expect a certain amount of weird shit. Neural implants that let you access the tactical network with a thought, standard issue. Powered exoskeletons that make you stronger than a pre-augmentation weightlifter. Old news. MREs that actually taste good. Okay, that's still science fiction, but everything else is pretty much par for the course. What you don't expect is to wake up one morning and discover that you can suddenly see in the dark, or bench press a small vehicle without your exosuit, or remember with perfect clarity the face of every person you've ever met. I'm telling you, Martinez, something freaky is going on. Staff Sergeant Dominic Lee perched on the edge of his bunk, eyes closed, reciting from memory. The complete works of William Shakespeare, page 1032, Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Private First Class Alex Martinez stared at him, mouth agape. Since when do you read Shakespeare? I don't! Lee's eyes snapped open. That's the point. I glanced at a copy in the rec room yesterday, and now I can recite the whole damn thing. Every word, every page number, even the footnotes. Maybe you're just discovering your inner thespian. Very funny. Lee stood up and walked to his footlocker. Without apparent effort, he lifted the solid steel box with one hand. And how do you explain this? This thing weighs over 100 kilos. Martinez's smile faded. Okay, that's new. It's not just me either. Nguyen in Bravo Company swears she can hear conversations through walls now. And Williams? He was colorblind his whole life. And suddenly he's describing colors he's never been able to see before. You think it's connected to the Gizrak attack? The one that fizzled? Fizzled for us, maybe. Lee set the footlocker down with surprising gentleness. But it sure as hell didn't fizzle for them. Martinez nodded slowly. The reports had been trickling in over the past week. Entire Gizrak battle groups going dark, their ships found later, crews dead or dying from what appeared to be their own bioweapon. No one was shedding any tears over it. The Gizrak had been the aggressors in this conflict from day one, attacking coalition outposts without provocation. Command's keeping something from us, Lee continued. Medical's been running tests non-stop, but they won't tell us what they're looking for. Maybe they don't know either. Maybe. Lee didn't sound convinced. But here's the really weird part. I feel good. Better than good. Like I've been running at half capacity my whole life, and suddenly someone turned the power all the way up. Martinez considered this. Now that Lee mentioned it, he had been feeling unusually energetic lately. And just yesterday, he'd solved a complex targeting calculation in his head, without his neural implant, something that should have been impossible. You think we're turning into some kind of super soldiers? Lee shrugged. I think we're turning into something. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. The Gizrak High Command vessel, Unyielding Dominance, was uncharacteristically quiet. In the main strategy chamber, Supreme Commander Vikrust stood before the assembled War Council, his usually immaculate scales now dull and flaking, the first visible sign of the infection that was ravaging his people. The weapon has failed, he stated, his voice a dry rasp. Worse than failed. It has turned against us. Impossible, General Zakvar protested, though his own scales showed signs of the disease. Our scientists assured us it was keyed specifically to non-Gazarak biology. Our scientists were wrong. Vikrust pulled up a holographic display. The virus has mutated. We believe it happened upon contact with human genetic material. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Humans, Skvar spat the word like a curse. Always humans. How is it possible that such a primitive, chaotic species continues to thwart us? They are not primitive, corrected Science Director Tarl, the only council member who appeared completely healthy. That has been our error from the beginning. Their biological systems are extraordinarily adaptive. Their immune responses, while seemingly crude, are remarkably effective. And their genome... What about their genome? Vakrus demanded. It is chaotic, yes, but purposefully so. Whereas we have engineered our DNA to be stable, resistant to mutation, humans have embraced genetic flux. Their very cells are designed to adapt, to incorporate useful traits, even from hostile sources. Like our virus. Precisely. Tarl brought up a new display, showing a human DNA strand interacting with the Gezrak bioweapon. They're not just surviving exposure, they're assimilating the viral code, using it to enhance their own capabilities. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. And there is no defense? No countermeasure we can deploy? Vakrust's normally commanding voice had diminished to something close to pleading. Tarl hesitated. There might be one option. It is extreme. Our situation is extreme, Director. We could reintroduce genetic diversity into our population. Tarl's words hung in the air like a heretical proclamation. Undo centuries of careful engineering. Allow for mutation, for adaptation. Become like them? Zakvar was aghast. Chaotic? Unpredictable? Survive, Tarl corrected. It would take generations, of course. Too late for most of us in this room. But the Gezrak species would continue. Vakrust considered this, his proud bearing diminished by the weight of the choice before him. To maintain the purity that had defined their civilization for centuries, or to embrace the very chaos they had sought to eliminate. In the end, it wasn't much of a choice at all. Begin the procedures, he commanded. Save those who can be saved, and prepare a communication to the coalition forces. I believe the term is surrender. Commodore Eileen O'Neill had seen a lot of strange things in her 30 years with the coalition fleet. She'd negotiated with silicon-based life forms that communicated through crystalline resonance. She'd survived a Vex mind-melding attempt that left her speaking in rhyming couplets for a week. She'd even once had to explain the concept of knock-knock jokes to a species that had no doors and communicated exclusively through interpretive dance. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for receiving a formal surrender from the Gezrak High Command. They want to what now? She asked, certain she'd misheard. Surrender, Commodore, her communications officer repeated. Unconditionally, and they're requesting medical assistance. O'Neill blinked. The Gezrak. The same Gezrak who have been trying to exterminate us for the past 3 years. The same Gezrak who just tried to wipe us out with a bioweapon. Those Gezrak? Yes, ma'am, those Gezrak. Well, I'll be damned. O'Neill leaned back in her command chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. Put me through to Earth Central, and get me a secure channel to Dr. Vaughn after that. I have a feeling her expertise is about to become very valuable. The ensuing conversation with Earth Central was brief but intense. The decision was made quickly. Accept the surrender, offer medical aid where possible, but maintain maximum security protocols. Dr. Vaughn, O'Neill greeted the scientist when the second call connected. How do you feel about making house calls to dying aliens? Vaughn's expression was a mixture of surprise and intrigue. I assume you're referring to the Gezrak? Got it in one. They've surrendered and are requesting medical assistance. Apparently their little biological present has come back to bite them in their scaly asses. Fascinating. Vaughn's scientific curiosity was clearly piqued. I'd need samples, of course. Access to their medical database would be invaluable, and I'd want a full security detail. Just because they're dying doesn't mean they're not dangerous. All arrangements will be made. How soon can you be ready? I've been ready since the moment we detected the bioweapon, Commodore. Vaughn's eyes gleamed with the light of scientific discovery. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Breakthrough? O'Neill raised an eyebrow. The Gezrak virus, or rather, what it's becoming in combination with human DNA. It could revolutionize medicine as we know it. Accelerated healing, enhanced immunity, possibly even extended lifespans. So you're saying their attempt to kill us might actually help us live longer? O'Neill laughed. If that isn't the definition of irony, I don't know what is. Irony, serendipity, call it what you will. Vaughn was already gathering her equipment. I'll be on the next transport to your coordinates. As the call ended, O'Neill turned to look out at the starfield visible through the command deck's viewport. Somewhere out there, the once mighty Gizrak fleet was waiting. Their warriors dying, their civilization on the brink of collapse, all because they had underestimated humanity's most basic quality, adaptability. Irony's a bitch, she murmured, echoing Admiral Davis's words from weeks earlier. And so is karma. Let me tell you something about first contact situations that they don't teach you in the academy. They're awkward as hell. I mean, think about it. You've got two species who've never met before, with different biologies, different cultural norms, different everything. Half the time, what's a friendly gesture in one culture is a mortal insult in another. I once saw a diplomat nearly cause an interstellar incident, because he didn't know that making direct eye contact with a Tellurian was essentially the equivalent of flipping them off while insulting their mother. But awkward as first contacts might be, first surrenders are 1,000 times worse. The Gizrak surrender ceremony took place aboard the Coalition flagship Endeavour. Security was tight. Despite their condition, no one was taking any chances with the species that had been trying to exterminate humanity for the better part of 3 years. Supreme Commander Vikrest, once the most feared military leader in the Gzrak hegemony, now needed assistance just to stand. His scales, once a vibrant jade, had faded to a sickly gray-green. His breathing was labored, and his movements were slow and pained. Across from him stood Admiral Davis, representing the Coalition forces, and Dr. Vaughn, who had been studying the Gizrak virus and its effects non-stop since her arrival. Supreme Commander, Davis acknowledged with a formal nod. On behalf of the Coalition of Sentient Species, I accept your surrender. Vikrest's head dipped in what might have been a nod, or might simply have been weakness. The terms, he rasped, are as we discussed, Davis confirmed. The Gizrak hegemony will cease all hostilities against Coalition worlds and outposts. All Gizrak military vessels will stand down and submit to Coalition inspection. In return, we will provide medical assistance to affected Gizrak populations. And our worlds will remain under Gizrak control, with Coalition oversight until such time as your civilization has stabilized. Davis's expression softened slightly. We're not conquerors, Commander, unlike some. Vikrest acknowledged this with a small gesture. The irony is not lost on me, Admiral. I imagine not. Davis turned to Dr. Vaughn. Doctor, perhaps you'd like to explain what you've discovered. Vaughn stepped forward, her manner professional but not unkind. Supreme Commander, we believe we've developed a treatment that may help alleviate the symptoms of the virus. It won't cure those already infected, but it could slow the progression enough to give your scientists time to implement the genetic diversity program you've initiated. Vikrest's eyes widened slightly, the Gizrak equivalent of shock. How did you... Your science director, Inktarl, has been very cooperative, Vaughn explained. It's a bold plan. Reintroducing genetic variation into your population goes against centuries of Gizrak biological philosophy, but it's your best chance for long-term survival. And this treatment? Vaughn hesitated, glancing at Davis, who nodded. It's derived from human antibodies that have been exposed to the mutated virus. Essentially, we're giving your people a little bit of what makes us, well, us. A strange sound emanated from Vikrest, a dry, rattling noise that took the humans a moment to recognize as laughter. So not only has your species survived our weapon, he said, but now your blood will save ours. The universe has a strange sense of humor, Doctor. That it does, Commander. Vaughn's expression was somber. I should warn you, though, this treatment may have unforeseen effects. We're already seeing unusual adaptations in treated Gizrak cells. What kind of adaptations? Increased cellular plasticity, enhanced neural connectivity. Nothing dangerous, but your people may find themselves becoming more adaptable. More human-like in certain biological respects. Vikrest was silent for a long moment. Perhaps, he finally said. That would not be such a terrible fate. 6 months after the surrender, the Coalition research vessel Curiosity orbited the Gizrak homeworld, Zakra. In the main laboratory, Dr. Vaughn peered through a microscope at a sample of Gzrak tissue, making occasional notes on her tablet. Extraordinary, she murmured. Simply extraordinary. I take it the treatment is working? Admiral Davis had come aboard for a progress report, though everyone knew his presence was as much diplomatic as it was practical. Better than we could have hoped, as Vaughn straightened, gesturing to the display screen where magnified cells pulsed with life. The genetic diversity program is accelerating. We're seeing adaptations that should have taken generations occurring within months. Because of our treatment? Partially, but I think there's more to it. Vaughn brought up a comparison view, showing human cells alongside Gezrak cells. The virus didn't just mutate when it encountered human DNA, it learned from it. And now, through our treatment, it's teaching the Gezrak cells to do the same. Davis frowned. Is that safe? Surprisingly, yes. The changes are guided, beneficial. It's as if the virus has become a teacher of sorts. Vaughn shook her head, smiling slightly. If you'd told me a year ago that our greatest medical breakthrough would come from an enemy bioweapon, I'd have had you committed. And if you told me I'd be standing on a research vessel orbiting the Gezrak homeworld without being shot at, I'd have done the same. Davis moved to the viewport, gazing down at the planetary surface below. How are they taking it? Culturally, I mean. Their whole society was built around genetic perfection and stasis. Better than you might expect. Director Enktarl has been instrumental in reshaping Gezrak attitudes. He's been using Earth history as an object lesson, how our chaotic, messy evolution led to our adaptability and eventually our survival. Never thought I'd see the day when the Gezrak were studying human history for inspiration. Life is full of surprises, Admiral. Vaughn joined him at the viewport. Speaking of which, have you seen the latest reports from the enhanced human subjects? Davis nodded. The enhancements caused by exposure to the mutated virus had stabilized in the human population, resulting in a range of improved capabilities. Increased cognitive function, enhanced sensory perception, accelerated healing, and more. Each affected individual manifested different combinations of these traits, seemingly based on their existing genetic predispositions. General Hammond is practically giddy, Davis remarked. Says it's like someone handed us super soldiers on a silver platter. And you? What do you think? Davis was quiet for a moment. I think we dodged a bullet, or rather, absorbed it and turned it into armor. He turned to face Vaughn. But I'm concerned about the long-term implications. These changes are heritable, Doctor. We're looking at a potential evolutionary fork in the human species. Not a fork, Vaughn corrected. An acceleration. These changes aren't outside the realm of what might have eventually occurred naturally. They're just happening faster. And more importantly, they're happening to all of us, not just a select population. There won't be enhanced humans and regular humans a few generations from now. Just humans, continuing to do what we've always done, adapt and overcome. Davis considered this. And the Gezrak are learning to do the same, in their own way. Vaughn's expression turned thoughtful. You know what the real irony is? Their bioweapon was supposed to exploit the differences between species, to target non-Gezrak life forms. Instead, it's teaching us all how similar we really are at the most fundamental level. Life finds a way? Something like that. Vaughn smiled. Though I prefer life makes a way. It's not passive. It's an active process of creation and recreation, of finding solutions to problems that seem insurmountable. Very philosophical, Doctor. It's hard not to get philosophical when you're watching evolution happen in real time, Admiral. A soft chime from Vaughn's console interrupted their conversation. She crossed back to her workstation, examined the incoming data, and let out a surprised laugh. What is it? Davis asked. The latest results from the Gezrak subjects. Vaughn shook her head in wonder. They're developing a sense of humor. The thing about the universe that most species don't grasp until it's too late is that it has absolutely zero respect for your plans. You can have the most meticulously crafted strategy, backed by millennia of tradition and the finest minds your civilization has to offer. And the universe will just look at it, say, that's cute, and proceed to flip the whole thing upside down. The Gezrak learned this lesson the hard way. They'd spent centuries perfecting their genome, removing what they saw as weak, chaotic elements, creating what they believed was the ideal form of their species. They'd engineered a bioweapon designed to eliminate competing life forms while leaving them untouched. They'd planned for every contingency, except humans. They hadn't planned for a species that treated adversity as a growth opportunity. They hadn't accounted for a genome that was less a fixed blueprint and more a set of flexible guidelines. And they certainly hadn't anticipated that their perfect weapon would end up being the catalyst for both their near destruction and their eventual rebirth. 3 years after the virus incident, as it had come to be known in official records, and the backfire blunder, in less official circles, representatives from all coalition species gathered on Earth for the signing of the Gezrak Integration Treaty. It was a historic moment, the formal acceptance of the former enemy into the coalition they had once sought to destroy. The Gizrak delegation was led by Science Director, now Chancellor, Tarl, one of the few high-ranking officials to survive the viral outbreak. Beside him stood Dr. Vaughn, whose work had been instrumental in developing the treatments that saved the Gizrak from extinction. On behalf of the Gizrak Collaborative, Tarl addressed the assembly, his once rigid posture now more fluid, his scales displaying subtle variations in color that would have been considered imperfections in the old Gizrak society. I extend our gratitude and our commitment to peaceful cooperation with all sentient species. The formal speeches continued, full of diplomatic niceties and carefully worded commitments. But it was during the reception afterward that the real signs of change became apparent. Tarl approached a group that included Admiral Davis, Dr. Vaughn, and several other key figures from the crisis. "Admiral," Tarl greeted, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting, something no Gizrak would have done before the viral adaptations. "I believe your people have an expression. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Davis shook the offered hand, still somewhat surprised by how natural the interaction felt. "We do indeed, Chancellor. An apt philosophy, though perhaps we should amend it. What doesn't kill you might turn you into something better." "I'll drink to that." Davis raised his glass in a toast. "As will I." Tarl mimicked the gesture with his own drink, another human custom the Gizrak had adopted. "Dr. Vaughn, your latest research is most impressive. The applications of viral-mediated genetic therapy could revolutionize medicine across all our species." "It's still early days," Vaughn demurred, though her pride in the work was evident. "But yes, the potential is enormous. We're seeing possibilities for treatments of conditions that were once considered incurable. From weapon to wonder drug," Lee remarked. The staff sergeant had been assigned to the diplomatic security detail, his enhanced capabilities making him ideal for the role. "Talk about a plot twist." "Indeed." Tarl's mouth curved in what had become the Gizrak approximation of a smile. "A reminder that even the darkest intentions can sometimes yield the brightest outcomes." "That's surprisingly optimistic coming from a Gizrak," Martinez commented, then immediately looked chagrined. "Sorry, no offense intended." "None taken." Tarl's expression turned contemplative. "We were not always as you knew us, you know. In our distant past, before the genetic purification programs, Gizrak were explorers, artists, philosophers. It was fear that drove us to seek perfection, fear of change, of the unknown." "And now?" Vaughn asked. "Now we are remembering what it means to embrace change rather than fear it." Tarl gestured around the room, where humans and Gizrak and a dozen other species mingled freely. "It is liberating." As the evening progressed, the conversation turned to the future. Joint research initiatives, cultural exchange programs, plans for cooperative space exploration. The lingering wariness between humans and Gizrak hadn't disappeared entirely, but it was fading, replaced by cautious optimism and genuine curiosity. Near the end of the reception, a human child, the daughter of one of the diplomats, approached Tarl with the fearlessness that only children possess. "Is it true that you used to be the bad guys?" she asked, her head tilted in curiosity. A hush fell over the nearby conversations, the adults tensing at the potentially awkward question. Tarl regarded the child thoughtfully. "I suppose from a certain perspective we were," he answered honestly. "We were afraid, and fear can make anyone behave badly." "My mom says you're different now." "We are learning to be." The child considered this, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. "People can change. My teacher says that's what growing up is all about." "Your teacher is very wise." Tarl's eyes crinkled at the corners, another new facial expression the Gizrak had developed. "Perhaps that is what all of us have been doing, growing up." The child smiled, apparently satisfied with this answer, and skipped back to her mother. Watching this exchange, Davis leaned over to Vaughn. "Out of the mouths of babes," he murmured. "Indeed." Vaughn's expression was thoughtful. "You know, for all our scientific advances, all our technological marvels, sometimes I think the greatest human trait is simply our ability to change our minds." "Not just our minds," Davis corrected, nodding toward Tarl, whose scales now displayed subtle patterns that would have been considered aberrations in pre-virus Gizrak. "Our very selves." In the decades that followed, the virus incident came to be seen as a turning point in interstellar relations. The Gizrak, once the most feared military power in the known galaxy, became leaders in medical research and xenobiology. Their understanding of genetic engineering, combined with human adaptability, led to breakthroughs that benefited all coalition species. Humans, enhanced by the mutated virus, continued to explore and expand throughout the galaxy. The changes wrought by the virus became a natural part of human evolution, passed down through generations, refining and stabilizing with each new cohort. And somewhere, on a distant world at the edge of Coalition space, a team of human and Gezrak scientists worked together on a new project, a comprehensive genetic library of all known sentient species, designed not as a weapon, but as a resource for understanding, healing, and growth. You know, Dr. Vaughn, now Professor Emeritus Vaughn, remarked to her former adversary and current research partner, Tarl, as they reviewed the latest additions to the library. There's an old Earth saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." An interesting concept, Tarl replied. Though in our case, I suppose it would be, the weapon of my enemy became the salvation of us all. Not quite as catchy, Vaughn laughed, but more accurate. Humans and your obsession with catchy phrases. Tarl shook his head, but his tone was affectionate. Always trying to compress complex realities into simple statements. It's a gift. Vaughn's smile faded into a more serious expression. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the virus hadn't mutated the way it did? If it had worked as intended? Tarl was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, but I find such counterfactuals ultimately unproductive. The universe unfolds as it does, not as we wish it would. Another catchy phrase. Perhaps I've been spending too much time with humans. Tarl's scales rippled in amusement, a new form of expression that had developed in the Gezrak over time. But to address your question, I believe something similar would have eventually occurred. Perhaps not as dramatically, perhaps with greater loss of life, but the end result would have been similar. What makes you say that? Because the fundamental truth that we discovered, that adaptation is strength, not weakness, that diversity is an advantage, not a flaw, was always there, waiting to be recognized. The virus simply accelerated the process. Vaughn nodded slowly. A catalyst. Precisely. Tarl gestured to the displays surrounding them, each showing the genetic code of a different species. In chemistry, a catalyst doesn't create a reaction that wouldn't otherwise occur. It simply makes it happen faster, with less energy required. The universe was already moving toward greater interconnection, greater understanding between species. We just took a rather dramatic shortcut. Via a bioweapon. Via a bioweapon that became something else entirely when it encountered human DNA. Tarl's expression turned thoughtful. Perhaps that is the most important lesson of all, that even the most destructive forces can be transformed into creative ones, given the right circumstances. Are you getting philosophical in your old age, Chancellor? Another human trait I seem to have acquired. Tarl's scales rippled in amusement, along with an appreciation for your Earth chocolate and an inexplicable fondness for what you call dad jokes. The chocolate I understand. The dad jokes I apologize for on behalf of all humanity. They shared a moment of companionable silence, these two beings who had once been on opposite sides of a conflict that threatened to destroy them both. It occurs to me, Tarl said finally, that the true value of your species to the galaxy isn't just your biological adaptability, though that is certainly remarkable. It's your conceptual adaptability, your willingness to change your minds when presented with new information. Not all humans are so flexible, Vaughn noted wryly. No, but enough of you are. And more importantly, your culture values this flexibility, even celebrates it. Where we Gezrak once saw only chaos in your constant questioning and changing, I now recognize a profound strength. And we've learned from you as well, Vaughn pointed out. Your methodical approach to problems, your long-term thinking, these have benefited humanity enormously. Tarl nodded, acknowledging the point. Perhaps that is the greatest outcome of all from this incident. Not the medical advances, not the enhanced capabilities, but the recognition that different species have different strengths, and that together, we are greater than the sum of our parts. Now who's being catchy? I believe the human expression is sue me. Their laughter echoed through the laboratory, a sound that would have been inconceivable just a few short decades earlier. If there's one constant in the universe, it's that life will surprise you. Not just occasionally, not just when you let your guard down, but consistently, persistently, with a determination that borders on the personal. The Gezrak learned this lesson through near extinction and subsequent rebirth. Humans learned it through an enemy weapon that became an evolutionary boost, and the galaxy as a whole learned it through watching former enemies become essential allies. 10 years after the Gizrak Integration Treaty, a new threat emerged from beyond the borders of known space. A silicon-based hive intelligence that communicated through quantum entanglement and viewed carbon-based life as nothing more than an inefficient use of planetary resources. The first attacks were devastating. Entire colonies on the outer rim were converted to computation substrates, their organic inhabitants simply processed away, their molecules repurposed for more efficient use. But where previous generations might have fractured, might have turned on each other in fear and desperation, the coalition stood unified, and at the forefront of the defense were joint Gizrak human task forces, their complementary strengths creating a formidable bulwark against the silicon threat. The enhanced cognitive abilities of humans, combined with the methodical, long-term strategic thinking of the Gizrak, proved to be exactly what was needed to counter the cold logic of the hive. And the viral research that had begun as a weapon of war became the foundation for a new biological defense system, one that could disrupt the quantum communications of the silicon entities without harming organic life. You know what the real irony is? Lee, now General Lee, remarked to Martinez during a strategy session aboard the coalition flagship Unity. If the Gizrak had never tried to wipe us out with that virus, we'd probably all be silicon chips by now. Life's funny that way, Martinez agreed. 1 minute you're facing extinction, the next you're leading the charge against space robots. Not robots, corrected the Gizrak tactical officer, Clavor. The term implies mechanical construction. These entities are grown, not built. It was a joke, Clavor. Ah. The Gizrak's scales rippled in the pattern that had become their equivalent of a smile. Human humor continues to elude me at times. Though I am improving, am I not? You're a regular comedian, Lee assured him, clapping him on the shoulder. Another human gesture the Gizrak had come to accept, even appreciate. Now let's figure out how to stop these silicon bastards before they process any more of our colonies. As they bent over the tactical display, human and Gizrak working in seamless cooperation, an observer might have been forgiven for forgetting that just a few decades earlier, these species had been locked in a bitter war of extinction. Now their differences weren't barriers but advantages, complementary approaches to problem-solving that, together, created solutions neither could have devised alone. And that, perhaps, was the greatest transformation wrought by the virus. Not the biological changes, significant though they were, but the psychological ones. The recognition that diversity wasn't a weakness to be eliminated but a strength to be embraced. That adaptation wasn't a compromise of purity but the very essence of life itself. In the end, the silicon threat was contained, though not without cost. Dozens of worlds had been processed before the coalition forces developed an effective counter-strategy. But unlike previous galactic conflicts, this one left the allied species not weakened and divided, but stronger and more unified. At the memorial service for those lost in the conflict, Admiral Davis, now well into his 70s but still commanding respect from all who served under him, stood before representatives of every coalition species, his enhanced physique showing few signs of his advanced age. Today we honor those who gave their lives in defense of all life, he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast assembly hall. Not just human life, not just Gizrak life, but all life that chooses creation over destruction, growth over stagnation, cooperation over domination. He paused, looking out over the gathered beings, so different in form and function, yet united in purpose. A wise person once told me that the universe has no respect for our plans, he continued. That no matter how carefully we craft our strategies, reality has a way of upending them. I've come to believe that this isn't a bug in the system. It's the feature. It's how the universe teaches us to adapt, to grow, to become more than we were. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. 20 years ago, our greatest enemies unleashed a weapon designed to destroy us. Instead, it became the catalyst for the greatest alliance our galaxy has ever known. 10 years ago, a new threat emerged that could have ended all organic life. Instead, it forged our alliance into something unbreakable. Davis's gaze settled on the Gizrak delegation, led by Chancellor Tarl, whose scales now displayed the subtle variations in pattern and color that had become common among their species, visible evidence of the genetic diversity they had reintroduced. I don't know what challenges tomorrow will bring, but I do know this. We will face them together, and whatever tries to destroy us. A smile curved his lips. Well, we'll probably just absorb it and turn it into something useful. It's kind of our thing now. Laughter rippled through the assembly. Not just from the humans, but from the Gzrak and many other species as well. It was the laughter of shared understanding, of a joke that transcended biological differences because it was rooted in a common experience. As the formal ceremony concluded and the representatives began to mingle, Davis found himself approached by a young Gzrak, one of the first generation to be born after the viral adaptations had become standardized in their species. "Admiral," the young Gzrak greeted him with the perfect inflection of respect tinged with awe that only the very young can manage. "Is it true that our species once tried to destroy yours?" Davis regarded the young being thoughtfully. With his variable patterned scales and fluid movements, this Gzrak was visibly different from the rigid uniform warriors Davis had first encountered decades ago. "That's ancient history," he replied gently, "before you were born." "But it is true?" Davis sighed. "Yes, it's true. Just as it's true that humans once fought wars against other humans for equally misguided reasons. We all have moments in our past that we're not proud of. And now we are allies. More than allies," Davis corrected. "Partners, friends even. The Gzrak bring strength to our coalition that no other species possesses, just as we all do." The young Gzrak seemed to consider this. "My teacher says that the virus changed everything, that it made us better." "The virus was just a catalyst," Davis said, unconsciously echoing Inktarl's words from years earlier. "The capacity for change, for growth. That was always within your species, just as it was in mine. We just needed something to remind us of it." "I think I understand." The young Gzrak's scales rippled in a pattern of contemplation. "It is like the story of the Earth Phoenix, yes? From destruction comes rebirth." Davis smiled at the cultural cross-pollination evident in the reference. "Something like that. Though I'd say it's more like this. Sometimes what looks like the end of the story is just the beginning of a better one." The young Gzrak nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. As Davis watched him move away to rejoin his cohort, he felt a presence at his side and turned to find Dr. Vaughn, now well into her 80s but still sharp as ever. "Dispensing wisdom to the younger generation?" she asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Trying to," Davis admitted. "Though sometimes I wonder if they need it. This new generation of Gzrak, they're so different from the ones we first encountered." "As are the new generation of humans," Vaughn pointed out. "The viral enhancements have stabilized, become a natural part of our genome, and the cultural exchange has been equally transformative. Our children grow up with Gzrak friends, learning their philosophy alongside our own. Would you ever have imagined it? Back when we first detected that bioweapon?" "Not in a million years." Vaughn's expression turned thoughtful. "And yet, looking back, it seems almost inevitable. As if the universe was just waiting for the right moment to knock some sense into both our species." With a virus, she agreed. Life does have a sense of humor, doesn't it?" Davis laughed. "That it does, Doctor, that it does. In the grand scale of galactic history, 20 years is barely a heartbeat. Civilizations rise and fall over millennia. Species evolve over millions of years. Stars burn for billions. And yet sometimes a single moment can change everything. A split-second decision, an unexpected encounter, a virus that mutates in an unanticipated way. The virus incident, as historians would later call it, though never to the face of those who lived through it, was one such moment. A cosmic roll of the dice that could have led to extinction, but instead sparked a renaissance. The lessons it taught were many, but perhaps the most important was this: that life, in all its forms, is not defined by its genetics, or its origins, or its past actions, but by its capacity to change, to grow, to become more than it was. Humans absorbed a viral weapon and turned it into an evolutionary boost. The Gzrak embraced the very diversity they had once sought to eliminate, and found in it not weakness, but strength. And together they created something new. A partnership that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. Not bad for a species of glorified monkeys and a bunch of talking lizards, if I do say so myself. But then again, I might be biased. My grandfather was Admiral Davis, after all. And my grandmother was a Gzrak geneticist who worked with Dr. Vaughn on the third generation of viral therapies. I'm what they call a hybrid perspective individual, raised with both human adaptability and Gzrak methodical thinking. And from where I stand, looking out at the galaxy our ancestors helped forge, diverse, unified, resilient, I can't help but think that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things we become. A weapon became a cure, enemies became allies, and a virus that was meant to divide us became the very thing that brought us together. If that's not the definition of cosmic irony, I don't know what is. But then again, irony's a bitch, and so is karma. Just ask the Gizrak. They learned it the hard way. And honestly, they wouldn't have it any other way. Neither would we. The end. You know what's worse than dying? Paperwork about dying. Lieutenant Commander Alexei Volkov squinted at the stack of documents in front of him, each one requiring his signature acknowledging that he was, for all intents and purposes, already a dead man. The medical officer across from him, Dr. Kincaid, according to her nameplate, didn't even look up from her tablet. Just standard procedure, Commander, she said, tapping something on her screen. The Garaxian outpost on Tetra 9 is classified as a terminal assignment. We need your informed consent. Informed consent to die, Alexei said flatly. How thoughtful. The average human survival time on Tetra 9 is approximately 6 months. Dr. Kincaid continued, reciting facts with all the emotion of a navigation computer. The toxic atmosphere combined with radiation levels makes it unsuitable for prolonged human habitation. Your medical implants will extend that somewhat, but I'll still die. Got it. Alexei scrawled his signature across another form. At least the unified Earth government is kind enough to let me know before they ship me off to guard a bunch of rocks nobody wants. Dr. Kincaid finally looked up. The mining operation on Tetra 9 extracts rare elements crucial for FTL drive components. It's not nobody wants, it's everybody needs. And yet they're sending a disgraced officer with a black mark on his record instead of, oh, I don't know, automated systems. Alexei raised an eyebrow. Face it, Doc. This is a punishment detail with a death sentence attached. Your service record isn't my concern, Commander. My concern is making sure you understand the medical implications of your assignment. Die slowly while watching rocks being dug up. Got it. Can I go now? The doctor's lips thinned to a tight line. There's one more thing. The Garaxians requested a human liaison despite the hostile conditions. They specifically asked for someone with combat experience. Your file indicates you have substantial experience. Alexei's smile didn't reach his eyes. The Silvani border conflict, yeah. My substantial experience is why I'm being sent to die on a rock nobody's ever heard of. The Garaxians are paying the UEG handsomely for human expertise. The Garaxians are paying for a human to die slowly while they watch. Let's not dress it up. He signed the final form with a flourish. There. Now my death is properly documented and filed in triplicate. Bureaucracy at its finest. The transport ship that delivered Alexei to Tetra 9 didn't even bother powering down its engines. The pilot, a gruff woman who had spoken exactly 7 words to him during the 3-week journey, popped the cargo bay door, practically shoved him down the ramp, and was back in the atmosphere before Alexei's boots had collected their first layer of Tetra 9's rusty dust. The welcoming committee consisted of 3 Garaxians in environmental suits, their insectoid forms making the human-designed suits look bizarrely distorted. The tallest one stepped forward, extending a 3-fingered hand in what was clearly a practiced human greeting. Lieutenant Commander Volkov, welcome to Resource Extraction Point 12 Delta. Just call me Alexei, he replied, shaking the offered appendage and trying not to think about how the chitin beneath the suit's material felt against his palm. And you are? Overseer Ziktok. I manage this facility. The Garaxian's translator rendered its clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless English. These are my sub-overseers, Crick and Vax. The other 2 Garaxians bobbed their helmeted heads but didn't speak. Charming, Alexei muttered. So where's my slow death habitat bubble? Ziktok's compound eyes narrowed behind its faceplate. Your environmental shelter is prepared according to the specifications provided by your government. However, before we proceed there, I must ask about your weapons capabilities. Alexei blinked. My what now? Your combat profile indicated significant experience with both energy and projectile weaponry, as well as tactical deployment in hostile terrain. We require verification of these skills. You want me to, what? Shoot something? Now? If possible, yes. Ziktok's mandibles clicked in what might have been impatience. The mining operation has experienced difficulties. Alexei looked around at the bleak, rust-colored landscape. Tetra 9's weak sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain, and in the distance, he could see the angular shapes of mining equipment against the horizon. Nothing moved except for swirling dust devils that danced between the rocks. What kind of difficulties are we talking about here? Your contract with the UEG was for a human liaison officer. Nothing in my briefing mentioned security work. The three Garaxians exchanged looks that even through their environmental suits seemed nervous. "We have lost 3 extraction units in the past lunar cycle," Vax said finally, its voice higher pitched than Zik-Tok's. "The damage pattern is consistent with predatory activity." "Predatory?" Alexei laughed. "This place is dead." "It's why I'm going to be dead in 6 months. Nothing lives here." "That assumption appears to be incorrect," Zik-Tok replied. "Something is hunting our equipment, and possibly our personnel." Well, this was certainly not in the terminal assignment briefing. Alexei scratched his chin, feeling the stubble that had grown during the final days of the transport journey. "Show me." 4 hours later, Alexei stood in his environmental shelter, a glorified pressure dome with recycled air that smelled faintly of plastic and disappointment, staring at the surveillance footage Zik-Tok had provided. He'd watched it 17 times now, and each viewing only deepened his confusion. The footage showed a standard Garaxian mining unit, a 6-legged mechanical harvester about the size of a small shuttle. It was operating normally, scooping up soil and filtering it through its processing chambers, when suddenly the ground beneath it seemed to shift. Not like an earthquake or a sinkhole. More like the dirt itself had suddenly decided to become something else. The mining unit tilted, then began to sink, but not before something lashed out from the disturbed soil. Something that looked disturbingly like a limb, though not one belonging to any creature Alexei recognized. The footage ended with the mining unit being dragged below the surface. The timestamp indicated the entire encounter had lasted less than 12 seconds. "Computer, play file designation Incident 2 again," Alexei ordered. His shelter's rudimentary AI complied, bringing up a different recording. This one showed 2 Garaxian workers in environmental suits, similar to the ones worn by his welcoming committee. They were taking soil samples about half a kilometer from the main facility, when the ground between them erupted. The image quality was poor. Dust and debris clouded the camera, but for a brief moment, Alexei could see something massive surging upward. It had no discernible shape, seeming to flow like liquid 1 second and solidify into jagged edges the next. One of the workers was enveloped immediately. The other turned to run but made it only 3 steps before a whip-like tendril wrapped around its leg and yanked it backward. The footage ended there. "Computer, play file designation Incident 3. This recording was from just 8 days ago. A larger mining operation. 5 units working in formation with a team of 6 Garaxians supervising. The attack came not from below this time, but from a nearby ridge." Something rolled down the slope, literally rolled like a boulder, but then unfolded as it reached the bottom, revealing the same shifting, amorphous quality Alexei had observed in the other recordings. It moved with terrifying speed, engulfing 1 mining unit and 2 workers before the others even began to react. By the time the remaining Garaxians activated their emergency beacons, 3 more had been taken. Only 1 had made it back to the facility. Alexei rubbed his eyes. So that's why they wanted someone with combat experience. Not to liaison. To hunt. Whatever the hell these things are. He pulled up the environmental data the Garaxians had provided. Tetra 9 was supposed to be a dead world. Too much radiation, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature variations between day and night. Nothing should be able to survive here, let alone predators large enough to take down industrial equipment and trained personnel. Yet the evidence was right in front of him. Something was hunting on this dead world. Multiple somethings, given the varied attack patterns. Alexei reached for the weapons case he'd brought with him, the one piece of luggage the UEG had allowed, which he'd found suspicious at the time. Now it made sense. Inside were his service pistol, a plasma rifle, and various tactical gear. Standard equipment for a security detail, completely unnecessary for a liaison officer. They'd known. The UEG had known exactly what they were sending him into. This wasn't just a terminal assignment, it was a suicide mission. Well, if he was going to die on this rock anyway, he might as well go down fighting. "You want to do what now?" Zik-Tok's translator couldn't fully convey the mixture of disbelief and alarm in the Garaxian's clicking speech, but the way its antennae flattened against its head made the sentiment clear enough. "I want to go hunting," Alexei repeated, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "These things, whatever they are territorial predators. They're defending their turf from what they perceive as invaders, namely you and your mining operation. And you believe you can hunt them alone?" Crick, the youngest of the sub-overseers, sounded skeptical. "Not exactly. I'm going to let them hunt me." Alexei grinned at the 3 Garaxians. "But I'm going to be ready for them." "This is inadvisable," Zik-Tok said firmly. The creatures have demonstrated significant tactical intelligence. They appear to learn from each encounter. So do I, Alexei replied. That's why humans are still around despite being frankly pretty squishy compared to most of the galaxy's apex predators. We adapt faster than anything that tries to eat us. Your confidence is noted but may be misplaced, Vax observed, its mandibles clicking rapidly in what Alexei had come to recognize as the Garaxian equivalent of nervous fidgeting. Perhaps we should request additional human specialists from your government, Alexei laughed. You think the UEG is going to send more humans to die here? They already wrote me off as a casualty the moment I signed those transfer papers. No, this is a one-man show. He finished loading his gear into the all-terrain vehicle the Garaxians had provided. A six-wheeled monstrosity designed for their physiology, but modified with human controls. It wasn't pretty, but it would get him where he needed to go. I'll be back before nightfall, probably. He climbed into the driver's seat. If not, well, you might want to reconsider your mining operations location. As he drove away from the facility, watching it shrink in his rearview mirror, Alexei allowed himself a moment of honest reflection. This was almost certainly suicide. Even if these creatures didn't kill him outright, the toxic atmosphere and radiation would finish the job within months. The UEG had sent him here to die, just as they'd promised in those cheerful terminal assignment papers. But there was something oddly liberating about having nothing to lose. For the first time since the court-martial, since the Solvani border conflict and the decisions that had ended his career, Alexei felt purposeful. If this was to be his last mission, he'd make it count. The terrain grew rougher as he approached the site of the most recent attack. According to the Garaxian data, all three incidents had occurred within a roughly 15-kilometer radius, suggesting the creatures had a defined hunting territory. Alexei had chosen the spot carefully, open enough to give him good sight lines, but with enough rocky outcroppings to provide cover if needed. He parked the vehicle and began setting up his equipment. First, seismic sensors placed in a 100-meter radius. If these things moved underground, he wanted advance warning. Next, motion detectors calibrated to ignore the perpetual dust storms that swept across Tetra 9's surface. Finally, a series of remotely triggered plasma mines, not powerful enough to cause serious environmental damage, but enough to discourage anything that came too close. When everything was in place, Alexei settled down behind a rocky ridge, plasma rifle resting on a makeshift bipod, and did something none of the Garaxians had tried yet. He began making noise. Lots of noise. He'd brought a portable sonic emitter, originally designed for geological surveys but easily reprogrammed to broadcast at frequencies that would travel through both air and solid ground. If these predators hunted by sensing vibrations, he was essentially ringing the dinner bell. "Come and get it," he muttered, activating the device. "Dinner is served." For nearly an hour, nothing happened. The sun crawled across Tetra 9's hazy sky, casting ever-changing shadows among the rocks. Alexei's environmental suit regulated his temperature, but he could feel sweat beading on his forehead anyway. Anticipation, adrenaline, the knowledge that he was deliberately making himself bait for something that had effortlessly killed Garaxians and their machines. Just as he was beginning to think he'd miscalculated, one of the seismic sensors pinged. Something was moving beneath the surface, approximately 70 meters to his east. Alexei swiveled his rifle, tracking the sensor readings as they showed the, whatever it was, moving steadily toward his position. 50 meters, 40, 30. And then nothing. The readings stopped. Alexei frowned, checking his equipment. Everything was still operational, but the movement had ceased. Had the creature sensed his trap somehow? Was it waiting just as he was? The answer came not from the east, but from directly behind him. A soft shuffling sound like sand sliding against stone. Alexei whirled, bringing his rifle up just in time to see a portion of the rocky ridge he'd been using for cover detach itself and flow toward him with horrifying speed. He fired instinctively, the plasma bolt striking the thing dead center. Instead of burning through it, however, the energy seemed to be absorbed, causing the creature to momentarily glow from within. It paused, its amorphous form rippling, and Alexei got his first clear look at what he was facing. It had no fixed shape, shifting between solid and semi-liquid states in a way that defied conventional biology. Its outer surface resembled the rocky terrain perfectly, a natural camouflage that explained how it had gotten so close without triggering his sensors. But beneath that mimicry, its true form was revealed where the plasma had struck. A crystalline structure, like living quartz shot through with veins of some darker mineral. "You're not organic," Alexei breathed, the realization striking him like a physical blow. "You're silicon-based, crystalline." The creature had no discernible sensory organs, but somehow Alexei knew it was studying him just as intently as he was studying it. For a long, tense moment neither moved. Then, without warning, it surged forward again, its form elongating into something like a striking serpent. Alexei rolled to the side, simultaneously triggering 2 of his plasma mines. The explosions caught the creature mid-lunge, the combined energy causing parts of its crystalline structure to crack and fall away. It made no sound, it had no mouth to scream with, but its movements became erratic, thrashing in what could only be pain. Alexei scrambled to his feet, switching his rifle to continuous fire, and aimed at the damaged sections. "Sorry about this," he said, though he doubted the creature could understand him. "But it's you or me, and I've got unfinished business." He pulled the trigger, directing a sustained plasma stream at the largest crack in the creature's structure. For several seconds it resisted, its form flowing like molten glass as it tried to regenerate the damage. But the plasma's heat proved too much. With a sound like shattering crystal, the creature broke apart, its once unified form collapsing into thousands of inert fragments. Alexei approached cautiously, rifle still ready. The pieces showed no sign of movement, but he wasn't taking chances. He collected several fragments in a specimen container, then quickly retreated to his vehicle. The seismic sensors were pinging again. Multiple signatures this time, converging on his position from all directions. "Time to go," he muttered, gunning the engine. As he sped back toward the Garaxian facility, he glanced in his rearview mirror just in time to see the ground where he'd been erupt in a fountain of dust and crystalline forms. They were hunting as a group now. Learning, adapting, just like humans did. A silicon-based life form? TikTok's antennae quivered with excitement as it examined the fragments Alexei had brought back. "This is unprecedented. Our initial surveys showed no signs of biological activity. Probably because you were looking for carbon-based life," Alexei pointed out. "I'm guessing these things register as geological formations on standard scans." "That would explain the anomalous mineral readings we've been getting since establishing the outpost," Vax agreed, its mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "We assumed they were just unusual ore deposits." "Well, they're unusual, all right. And they're pissed off that you're digging up their habitat." Alexei pulled up the footage from his helmet camera, showing the creature's attack and subsequent destruction. "They can mimic their surroundings perfectly. They move through solid ground like it's water, and they're intelligent enough to hunt in coordinated packs." "This changes everything," Crick said, its normally subdued demeanor giving way to agitation. "We must inform the Conclave immediately. Protocol dictates immediate cessation of operations on worlds with indigenous sentient life." "Whoa, hold on." Alexei raised a hand. "We don't know if these things are sentient. Intelligent predators, sure, but that's not the same as sentience. The distinction is irrelevant under Garaxian law," TikTok explained. "Any indigenous species demonstrating coordinated group behavior and adaptive learning capabilities falls under protected status. We cannot continue mining operations here." Alexei stared at the 3 Garaxians. "You're telling me that after I just risked my life to figure out what's been killing your people and equipment, you're just going to leave?" "It is our way," Vax said simply. "The universe contains abundant resources. Only life is irreplaceable." For a moment, Alexei was speechless. The UEG would never abandon a mining operation over something like this. They'd classified this entire planet as expendable. Classified him as expendable. For the sake of those rare minerals. The Garaxians were willing to walk away because they'd found something alive. "What about me?" he asked finally. "Your contract with the UEG was for a human liaison for your mining operation. If there's no operation..." The 3 Garaxians exchanged looks again, their compound eyes reflecting the harsh artificial lighting of the facility. "We will honor our contractual obligations," TikTok said slowly. "You were to be compensated for your expertise in helping establish a successful mining presence on Tetra 9. While circumstances have changed, you have indeed provided expertise that saved Garaxian lives. So what? You'll give me a ride home?" Alexei laughed bitterly. "The UEG won't take me back. This was a one-way trip." "Perhaps," TikTok suggested, its voice softening as much as the translator would allow. "You could serve a different purpose here." "Such as?" "Study. Observation. First contact protocol." TikTok gestured to the crystalline fragments. "You have already demonstrated an ability to interact with these life forms that we lack. The Conclave would value a comprehensive understanding of this species before determining long-term policy." Alexei looked down at the fragments, then back at the Garaxians. "You want me to be your... what? Xenobiologist? Ambassador to the rock monsters? We would provide all necessary resources and modify your environmental shelter for extended habitation, Vax added quickly. The radiation countermeasures we use for our own personnel could be adapted for human physiology. Wait, Alexei narrowed his eyes. Are you saying you could have made this place survivable for humans all along? The Garaxians had the good grace to look uncomfortable, their antennae drooping slightly. The UEG contract specified minimal life support requirements, Crick admitted. They were quite specific about the expected duration of human presence. They wanted me to die here, Alexei said flatly, and you knew it. It is not our place to question the internal policies of our trading partners, Ziktok replied diplomatically. However, circumstances have changed. If you are willing to remain as a research liaison, we are prepared to offer significantly enhanced accommodations. Alexei looked at the surveillance footage still playing on the screen, the creature shattering under his plasma fire, the others converging on his position afterward. He thought about the UEG and their terminal assignment paperwork, about the court-martial and the black mark on his record, about how they'd sent him here to die quietly and conveniently, far from Earth's media and oversight committees. I have conditions, he said finally. Name them, TikTok responded immediately. First, I want actual weapons, not just my personal gear. If I'm going to study these things up close, I need proper equipment, acceptable within reasonable limits. Second, I want communication access, not just to your conclave, but broader Galnet connectivity. The Garaxians hesitated at this. That would require significant infrastructure investment, Vax noted. And the UEG might not approve of unmonitored communications from a terminated officer. The UEG sent me here to die, Alexei reminded them. They don't get a vote anymore. After a brief chittering conference among themselves, Ziktok nodded. It can be arranged, though there will necessarily be some delay in transmission due to our remote location. Fine. Third condition, I want citizenship. Citizenship? Crick's antennae shot up in surprise. Of the Garaxian conclave? That is unprecedented for a human. Not Garaxian citizenship, Alexei clarified. I want sovereign claim to a portion of Tetra 9. Since the UEG has written it off and you're abandoning mining operations, there's no competing claim. I want official recognition as the human representative to this world. The three Garaxians stared at him, their compound eyes unreadable. You wish to claim this hostile environment as a human colony? Ziktok asked carefully. Not a colony. A research outpost. My outpost. Alexei smiled thinly. The UEG sent me here because they thought I was as good as dead. I'd like to prove them wrong in the most official way possible. After another conference, the Garaxians agreed to present his request to the conclave. 2 days later, Alexei Volkov became the officially recognized human administrator of Tetra 9, with a mandate to study its indigenous life and establish peaceful relations if possible. His first official act was to raise a flag outside his newly expanded environmental shelter, a simple design featuring a stylized black crystal on a field of rust red, with a single white star in the corner. His second act was to send a message to UEG headquarters, thanking them for the opportunity to serve humanity on this fascinating new frontier. He included footage of the crystal creatures and his successful defense against them, just to be helpful, of course. The response came 3 weeks later. A terse acknowledgement and a formal extension of his assignment, in recognition of his valuable service. No mention of the terminal nature of the posting. No reference to his 6-month life expectancy. Alexei pinned the message to the wall of his command center with a satisfied smile. Beneath it, he placed a tally chart. 1 mark for the creature he'd killed. The first entry in Tetra 9's official kill count. It wouldn't be the last. 6 months later, Alexei stood on a newly constructed observation platform, watching a small group of crystal entities gather at the perimeter of his outpost. They no longer attacked on sight, a development that had taken weeks of careful, often dangerous interaction to achieve. Instead, they maintained a respectful distance, their amorphous forms shifting and flowing in what he now recognized as their primary mode of communication. Still think they're trying to figure out if I'm edible? He asked, glancing at his companion. Dr. Eliza Nakamura, the UEG's hastily dispatched xenobiology specialist, adjusted the settings on her scanner with a small smile. More likely, they're trying to decide if you're a threat or a potential ally. Their chemical signatures suggest curiosity rather than hunger. Progress, then. Alexei nodded with satisfaction. A few months ago, they would have tried to absorb the entire platform with us on it. Your methods have been unorthodox, Eliza admitted, but effective. The UEG Science Directorate is very interested in your success where our previous reconnaissance missions failed. Failed meaning got eaten by crystal monsters? Something like that. Then she lowered her scanner. Though the official reports classified Tetra 9 as hostile to human habitation, rather than inhabited by silicon-based predators. Bureaucratic understatement at its finest. Alexei pointed to the largest of the gathered entities, its crystalline structure glinting with veins of what appeared to be copper. That one's the leader of this group. I call it Copper Top. Eliza rolled her eyes. We really need to establish a proper taxonomic classification system instead of your nickname-based approach. Hey, my outpost, my naming conventions. He grinned. Besides, the kill count board would look a lot less impressive with scientific designations. The board in question, now prominently displayed in the outpost's main hall, showed a tally of 37 confirmed kills, the unavoidable casualties of Alexei's early research efforts. But it also displayed a second count, 23 successful non-violent interactions. That number had been steadily increasing over the past 2 months. Below the platform, one of the smaller entities suddenly broke from the group, flowing toward the barrier at alarming speed. Eliza tensed, but Alexei put a hand on her arm. Wait, he said. Watch. The entity stopped just short of the barrier, a force field designed to repel their unique crystalline structure without causing harm. It rose up, forming a roughly cylindrical shape, then began to change color, its normally stone-like surface shifting through various mineral hues until it settled on a pattern that looked remarkably like... Is that supposed to be a human? Eliza asked, amazement evident in her voice. The entity had formed a crude approximation of a human figure, complete with limbs and a head-like protrusion. It held the shape for several seconds, then collapsed back into its natural amorphous form. They're learning mimicry beyond camouflage, Alexei explained, unable to keep the pride from his voice. I've been showing them images of different life forms from around the galaxy. They seem especially fascinated by bilateral symmetry. That's remarkable. Eliza was frantically recording the interaction on her datapad. This suggests a level of intelligence far beyond what we initially hypothesized. I tried to tell your predecessors that, but they were too busy setting up mining operations to notice they were stealing resources from sentient beings. Alexei's tone hardened slightly. It took the Garaxians about 3 seconds to recognize what was happening and withdraw. The UEG is still arguing over whether these mineral formations qualify for protected status. Hence my presence, Eliza reminded him. I'm here to make that determination officially. And I'm sure your decision will be completely uninfluenced by the fact that the UEG has already invested millions in establishing mining rights here. Alexei replied sarcastically. Before Eliza could respond, her communicator chimed. She checked it, then looked up at Alexei with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. Priority transmission from UEG Command. For both of us. She hesitated. It's marked eyes only. They retreated inside the environmental shelter to view the message. Admiral Winters, head of the UEG Expansion Division, appeared on the screen. His expression was grave. Commander Volkov, Dr. Nakamura, this transmission is secured and classified Level 5. What I'm about to share cannot leave Tetra 9. He took a breath. Approximately 7 hours ago, a Solvani battle group entered the Tau Ceti system, bypassing our early warning network. They've established orbital positions around 3 UEG colonies and are demanding immediate withdrawal of all human presence from what they claim is their sovereign territory. Alexei felt the blood drain from his face. The Solvani, the same species he'd fought during the border conflict, the conflict that had ended his career when he'd chosen to defend a civilian settlement instead of following orders to retreat. We're mobilizing a response, Admiral Winters continued. But the Solvani have technological advantages in several key areas. Their energy weapons, in particular, operate on principles our shields cannot fully counter. Why are you telling us this? Alexei asked, though he already suspected the answer. The mineral compounds you've been studying on Tetra 9, specifically the crystalline structures of the indigenous life forms, appear to possess unique energy absorption properties, properties that might be adaptable to our defensive systems. And there it was. The real reason the UEG had suddenly become so interested in his research. Not scientific curiosity, not ethical concerns about indigenous rights. Weapons development. You want me to weaponize them, Alexei said flatly. Turn living beings into shield technology. We're asking you to find a way to cooperate with them, Admiral Winters corrected, though the distinction seemed meaningless. The Solvani have made it clear they will not hesitate to use lethal force. Millions of human lives are at stake. The transmission ended, leaving Alexei and Eliza staring at each other in the sudden silence of the command center. I don't suppose saying no is an option? Eliza asked quietly. Alexei looked out the window at the crystal entities still gathered at the perimeter. They had formed a rough circle now, their surfaces pulsing with colors in what he'd come to recognize as their version of a deep discussion. The UEG wrote me off as dead the moment they sent me here, he said slowly. They only started caring when they realized I might be useful. That's a bit cynical, don't you think? Is it? He turned to face her. They sent a disgraced officer to a toxic planet with 6 months to live. No support, no research mandate, nothing but a one-way ticket and some paperwork acknowledging my imminent death. The only reason I'm still alive is because the Garaxians have better ethics than the government I swore to serve. Eliza didn't argue the point. She couldn't. The evidence was literally in the air they were breathing. The advanced filtration systems the Garaxians had installed to make the outpost truly habitable. So what will you do? She asked instead. Alexei was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he walked to the communications console and began typing. First, I'm going to send a message to the Garaxian Conclave. They need to know what's happening, and they have observer status in the Galactic Council. If the Solvani are violating territorial agreements, the Council should be informed. And second, he gestured to the crystal entities outside. I'm going to talk to them. Really talk to them, not just observe and study. If the UEG wants their help, they should have the choice to give it or withhold it. You think they can understand concepts like interstellar war and defensive technology? Eliza sounded skeptical. I think they understand territory and defense better than anyone, Alexei replied. That's what started this whole mess. They were defending their home from invaders. Sound familiar? He gathered his equipment, the specialized scanner he'd developed to translate the crystal entity's color and shape language, the projector that could display images they seemed capable of interpreting, and most importantly, a sample of Solvani metal he'd kept from his days in the border conflict. A reminder of why he'd made the choices that ended his career. As he prepared to return to the observation platform, Eliza caught his arm. What happens if they say no? She asked. If they refuse to help? Alexei smiled grimly. Then I'll respect their decision. And I'll remind the UEG that forcing the issue would make them no better than the Solvani they're fighting. That won't go over well? Probably not, he shrugged. But I've already died once, according to their paperwork. What's the worst they can do? Send me to a dead planet? 2 weeks later, a UEG diplomatic shuttle entered Tetra 9's atmosphere, escorted by a Garaxian vessel twice its size. Admiral Winters himself had made the journey, along with representatives from the Galactic Council, and surprisingly, a Solvani observer. They found Alexei waiting on the newly expanded landing pad, standing beside a crystalline formation that seemed to flow and shift with purpose. Behind them stretched a bizarre landscape, half military outpost, half alien habitat. Crystalline structures rose from the rusty soil in geometric patterns that were clearly not natural formations, while human technology had been integrated in ways that complemented rather than disrupted the environment. And everywhere, proudly displayed, was Alexei's flag, the black crystal on rust red, with its single white star. "Welcome to Tetra 9, Alexei called as the delegation disembarked. Or as the locals call it, Skirk Tal. Roughly translated, home of the flowing ones. Admiral Winters approached, his expression a careful mask of diplomatic neutrality. Commander Volkov, you've been busy. Just fulfilling my mandate as human administrator, Alexei replied cheerfully. Establishing peaceful relations with the indigenous population. Very successful, as you can see. The crystalline entity beside him rippled, its surface briefly forming patterns that resembled simplified human facial features before smoothing out again. The Solvani observer, a tall, avian humanoid with iridescent feathers and sharp, predatory eyes, made a soft trilling sound that might have been alarm or interest. You've achieved communication with them, the Solvani said, its translator rendering its melodic language into clipped, precise English. Impressive for a species so biologically dissimilar. It turns out we have more in common than you might think, Alexei replied. They're territorial, protective of their resources, and deeply suspicious of outsiders with big guns. Sound familiar? The Solvani's head crest rose slightly, a sign of irritation, if Alexei remembered his xenobiology correctly. Good. Commander, Admiral Winters interrupted, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. Perhaps we could continue this discussion inside? There are urgent matters to address. Of course. Alexei gestured toward the main facility. Though I should warn you, we'll have company. As they entered the environmental shelter, now expanded to 3 times its original size, the delegation found themselves face to face with a council of crystalline entities. 7 of them, arranged in a semicircle, each with distinctive mineral colorations that Alexei had come to recognize as individual identifiers. May I present the Skirktal Council, he said formally, the governing body of Tetra 9's indigenous population. They've agreed to hear your proposal regarding defensive technology sharing. Admiral Winters stared at the crystalline beings, then at Alexei, his diplomatic mask slipping to reveal genuine astonishment. You've established a political relationship with them? In 2 weeks? Oh, this has been months in the making, Alexei corrected. The kill count board was Phase 1, establishing mutual respect through combat prowess. Very important in their culture. The non-violent interactions came next, followed by rudimentary communication. The Garaxian Conclave has been instrumental in developing translation algorithms. He nodded to the Garaxian representatives, who clicked their mandibles in acknowledgement. By the time your message arrived about the Solvani situation, we were already discussing territorial boundaries and resource-sharing agreements. The Solvani observer made that trilling sound again, louder this time. This is unprecedented. Silicon-based sentience has been theorized but never confirmed, let alone diplomatic relations established. First time for everything, Alexei shrugged, including peace talks between humans and Solvani, apparently. The Galactic Council representative, a Taurian with 4 arms and a philosopher's robes, finally spoke up. This changes the parameters of our negotiations considerably. If Tetra 9 is inhabited by an indigenous sentient species, with whom diplomatic relations have been established, the territorial claims of both the UEG and the Solvani hegemony must be reconsidered. Exactly my thinking, Alexei agreed, which is why the Skirktal Council has prepared a proposal of their own. He activated the holographic display in the center of the room. A 3-dimensional map of the Tau Ceti system appeared, with various planets and orbital positions highlighted in different colors. The crystal entities, the Skirktal, have a unique relationship with certain types of energy. They don't just absorb it, they can redirect it, even across considerable distances. They've demonstrated an ability to create what you might call energy corridors between planets in the same system. The map shifted, showing lines of force connecting several worlds. Admiral Winters leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the strategic implications immediately. You're suggesting they could create a defensive network, he said slowly. A way to channel attacks away from populated areas. Better than that, Alexei replied. They're offering to establish permanent outposts on the disputed worlds, living shield generators essentially. But he raised a finger as the Admiral's expression brightened. Not as weapons, as neutral parties. They would protect civilian populations on both sides from military strikes. The largest of the crystalline entities, the one Alexei had nicknamed Coppertop, flowed forward, its surface rippling with patterns that the translation system rendered into text on the display. Life protects life. War between carbon forms unnecessary. Abundant resources for all. The Solvani observer chittered softly to itself, its head crest alternately rising and falling as it processed this information. And what do they want in exchange for this? Protection. Another pattern from Coppertop. Recognition. Territory. Exchange of knowledge. They want official status as a sentient species with sovereign rights to Tetra 9, Alexei explained. Plus scientific and cultural exchange programs with both human and Solvani worlds. They're particularly interested in geology and energy physics, for obvious reasons. Admiral Winters paced the room, his brow furrowed in thought. The UEG Security Council would need to vote on this. It's an unprecedented arrangement. The Solvani hegemony would require similar deliberations. The avian observer agreed, though its tone suggested it found the idea intriguing rather than objectionable. The Galactic Council could oversee the implementation, the Taurian offered, all four hands gesturing in what their species considered a formal proposal. Neutral oversight would ensure adherence to the agreement by all parties. As the delegation began to debate the details, Alexei quietly stepped back, moving to stand beside Dr. Nakamura, who had been observing the proceedings with barely contained excitement. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" she whispered. "From the moment you got that message from UEG Command." Alexei smiled enigmatically. "Let's just say I've had a lot of time to think about second chances. The UEG sent me here to die quietly. Instead, I found something worth living for. A whole new species. A new way of looking at the universe." He glanced at the crystal entities, now actively participating in the discussion through their translator. "And maybe, just maybe, a way to prevent others from dying in pointless territorial disputes. That's why you refused to follow orders during the border conflict," Eliza realized. "You were protecting civilians then too. And got court-martialed for my trouble." Alexei nodded. History has a funny way of coming full circle. The negotiations continued for 3 days. By the end, a preliminary agreement had been reached. The Skirktal would be recognized as the sovereign species of Tetra 9, with Alexei Volkov confirmed as their human liaison and administrator. They would establish protective outposts on disputed worlds in the Tau Ceti system, creating neutral zones where civilian populations of both human and Solvani origin would be safe from military action. In return, both the UEG and the Solvani hegemony would provide scientific and cultural exchange opportunities, along with limited mining rights on Tetra 9 under strict oversight from the Skirktal Council. As the delegation prepared to depart, Admiral Winters sought out Alexei one last time. "I owe you an apology, Commander," he said stiffly. "The terminal assignment to Tetra 9 was politically motivated. Your actions during the border conflict embarrassed certain powerful individuals who preferred a clean military narrative. You sent me here to die because I made some politicians look bad?" Alexei laughed incredulously. "That's even worse than I thought." "It was wrong," Winters admitted. "And in light of what you've accomplished here, the UEG is prepared to offer full rehabilitation of your service record, along with promotion to full commander and—" "No." Winters blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Alexei gestured to the outpost around them, to the crystal entities moving freely among the human structures. "I'm not coming back. My place is here now. But your career is right here," Alexei finished firmly. "Administrator of Tetra 9, human liaison to the Skirktal, and," he smiled, "founding citizen of the first Silicon-human cooperative sovereign territory in the galaxy." Admiral Winters studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. The UEG will honor your decision and your position here." He extended his hand. "For what it's worth, Commander, I believe you've done more for humanity in 6 months on this dead planet than most of us achieve in a lifetime." Alexei shook the offered hand. "Just remember that when the next uncomfortable hero comes along, not everyone gets a second chance on a world that was supposed to kill them." After the delegation departed, Alexei stood on the observation platform with copper top, watching the ships dwindle to points of light in Tetra 9's hazy atmosphere. "They will return," the crystal entity communicated through shifting patterns. "More humans, more other carbon life. Change comes. Change always comes," Alexei agreed. "The trick is making sure it's change for the better." He looked out over the landscape. Still harsh, still deadly to unprotected human life, but now transformed by understanding into something more than just a hostile environment, a home, a beginning. 6 months ago, they sent me here with nothing but a death sentence and some paperwork," he mused. "Now we have a flag, a respectable kill count, and a peace treaty that might just prevent an interstellar war." The crystal entity shifted, forming a brief approximation of what Alexei recognized as their version of amusement. Humans, always counting, always marking, strange carbon ways. "Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it," Alexei grinned. "Speaking of which, we should probably update the board. First diplomatic recognition by the Galactic Council definitely deserves its own category." As the dual suns of the Tau Ceti system began to set, casting long shadows across Tetra 9's rusty landscape, Alexei Volkov, the man who had been sent to die on a dead planet, made a final entry in his personal log, day 183 on Tetra 9. "Still not dead. In fact, I think I might just be getting started." The kill count board, still prominently displayed in the outpost's main hall, had a new section now. Below the tallies of combat victories and peaceful interactions, a single line read, "Lives saved, countless.
And counting.
Not bad for a terminal assignment. The end.